Hello, everyone. I see some of you have joined and you've joined early, so thank you so much for that. I am going to give it, let's do about 2 more minutes before we get started, and then we're going to dive right in. All right, so it's 8 o'clock. We're going to do about 1 more minute. Let some more people join, and then we'll dive in. So we won't start too much after the hour. We'll give it about 60 more seconds, and then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So welcome everybody to the Developer Summit 2025. If this is your first session, thank you so much for joining. If this is an additional session or you joined our keynote, thanks for sticking around and joining this session where we will be discussing implementing voice authentication with contact center. So we'll be going through what it looks like to build a secure user and customer experience using contact center, our product, and voice authentication configuration. All right, so as I mentioned or have not mentioned, my name is Rahima Amorer, and I'm a developer advocate engineer here at Zoom, focusing on all things having to do with customer experience, including contact center. So before we get started, some of the things that will be mentioned in today's session or today's content may be forward-looking. So please take a moment to review our safe harbor statement. We'll take about 5 seconds to review this, and then we'll go ahead and move on. All right, so moving forward, we're going to look at our agenda for today. The first thing we'll start with is an overview of our star product, Contact Center. We'll talk about what it is and how to get started with it briefly. Then we're going to go into a use case overview. So we built an application, but let's talk about why we did this. Then from there, we're going to talk about the tech stack that I used to build this application, and then we'll go through looking at the application flow. After that, we're going to have a demo looking at how the product works and how we accomplished our goal, voice authentication. So we'll get to see what that looks like in action. Then we're going to do a look ahead at what's to come and how to continue building on top of this product or this application, and then we'll wrap up. Lastly, before we close out, we are going to have time for a Q&A, question and answers. So I do want to make note that Q&A and the chat will be open during the session. Your question may not be answered during the session, but don't worry because we will have time at the end to go over all the questions you may have. All right, so starting off again, the star of the show is Zoom Contact Center, also known as ZCC. And if you're not familiar with this product, you may have actually heard about it in our keynote session. It was talked about in the fireside chat. Zoom Contact Center is an omni-channel support system. So you have access to video, phone, web, and SMS messaging, email, voicemail, etc. It's the whole 9 yards. You can get everything and access to it all for your customer experience. Now, when we think of Zoom Contact Center, we think of 2 different user types, and that's how we think about or separate them. We have our agents. These are the people who are working behind the scenes or those working for your business, and they're getting the calls to the customer service center. And then you have your consumers. So that might be people like you or me who are actually making a call to a customer service center for whatever issue that we have. So we're calling in as a consumer, and our agent is answering the phone. Those are the user types that we think of when we're working with contact center. Now, contact center has a breadth of different features, including AI automation. So you can have auto-generated experience notes, real-time analytics available easily through our APIs, and at the center of it all is Zoom's trusted core technology. So when we think about integrating ZCC, there are many ways to do this. This is a product that you can configure on your administration side on the zoom.us/my-home under your account, but that's not it. You can also integrate or use it within your own custom-built application. Now, the first way that we're going to talk about is through Smart Embed. So Smart Embed is a UI-ready embeddable soft phone that allows you to do inbound and outbound calling, engagement wrap-up, live transcription, recording, call transfers, and other features. Now, I introduced it as a soft phone, but it can do so much more than that. So really think of it as an easy way to integrate the agent experience into your progressive web application that you already have built. Now, moving on, we have our APIs. So you may already know this, you may have already worked with it, but Zoom consistently provides a robust API library for endpoints and events when working with our products. Contact Center is no different, and we have a library available. And with the library and the endpoints, you can see the action in your application, allowing you to see user data, engagement data, configuration options, etc. All of this can be managed and changed using our APIs. Now, with the use of your application credentials, which you can find on the marketplace, and some scope configuration, which also happens on the marketplace, working in or including user engagement experiences is a simple process with those APIs. Next, we have our Contact Center SDK. So this is another feature that allows you to embed the chat experience or the video experience within your application using a few simple line of codes. And then next, we have Zoom Contact Center apps. So if you're familiar with Zoom apps, if you've built with those, you know how that experience goes. You can create a custom application for use within the Zoom client. So this is best when we're thinking about working with our agent. So you can create an application customized for your agent's needs to increase or better the customer experience. So all of these are different ways to go ahead and integrate Zoom Contact Center into your application. Most of these can be done through a few simple line of codes, and you can find those lines of codes in our documentation. All right, so we've gone over what Zoom Contact Center is. We've talked about how you get started with it, how you integrate it, but now we're going to think about a use case. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you just to walk through it with me. The tagline for the story is, can you verify every detail of your life? So I want you to think you're going through your bank statement, scrolling through it, being a responsible adult, and you see a charge on there that you absolutely did not make. You know you didn't make it, and you start to panic. I know I would. I know I have. So you do what any, again, responsible adult will do, and you make a call to your bank. You're calling them, you're frazzled, maybe your breath is short, your chest is, your heart is racing. You need to figure out what happened. You answer the phone, and the first question that you're asked, can you verify your full name? Can you give me your address? What's your date of birth? What's your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your first love? A bunch of questions that when you're stressed, answering them is not the easiest thing to do. Now, that's one scenario of how this can go. Let's run it back to the beginning. You see the fraudulent charge, you're still stressed, that hasn't gone away, and you make a call to your bank. The first thing that you're prompted to do is to speak. All they need to do is hear your voice, hear a passphrase said with your voice, and from there, you can be verified. You can go forward speaking to an agent and solving your problem. Now, this is not a new experience, right? Being able to authenticate yourself with your voice isn't something that has not existed before. I just said it. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but the goal of today is to give you the tools on how to make it better and create it for yourself. And that is where our application comes in. So as we walk through that story before, if you're anything like me, you want to go with the latter choice. You don't want to have to think about all the different questions of what's going on. You just want to speak, and your voice gets you through. And that's why we built a ZCC CRM with voice authentication. I said a lot of acronyms, so let me spell them out. A Zoom Contact Center customer relational management tool using voice authentication. Now let's run through why this application would be beneficial. The first point is that there's an improved customer experience. So beyond what we just talked about, you have increased trust and loyalty, instant authentication, and stronger fraud protection or prevention. And next, the customer experience details are available on demand. So as we talked about a few slides back, you have instant access to call notes, recordings, user information, all through our APIs and events. And then lastly, there is an accelerated time to market. Because of the ease of use of Zoom Contact Center, Smart Embed, and SDKs in particular, this allows for a quick and easy integration process, and your time to go or your first hello is it's that easy. So that's why a few reasons why we built this application. Now we're going to jump into the tech stack. So looking at what was behind creating this product. For styling, I use a very familiar combination, React and Tailwind CSS on my front end to make everything look and operate as it should, have our state managed and whatnot. Then we're looking at our Zoom product, which is the contact center. For this specific product, I utilize Smart Embed, our APIs, and our flows, which are configured within our account. And then next, I use Next.js. So to make sure I had an easy page and routing system, I utilized Next.js to build this application. And then lastly, we have our voice authentication configuration. So we're going to talk about what I did in my product, and we'll talk about some other options that are available when creating voice authentication. All right, so diving more into our app flow and our tech stack, we use Zoom OAuth 2.0 with Next.js or NextAuth.js to go ahead and make sure our users were authenticated when getting started with our application. So to make sure that one, they're signed in, and two, they can get continued access to the APIs, we utilize OAuth 2.0, and we did this with a continuous token renewal. So within the functionality of our application, we have our authorization token that's being sent, and then a refresh token that's being created as often as needed. So we can send out more documentation on what this looked like, but we did utilize this in our application, again, for security and for ease of use, being able to continuously refresh our token for continued access to the APIs. So we have a little montage of pictures below. We have our user who logs in. We have our access token, which is sent to our app. And then we have credentials that are verified, and we can access the Zoom API. All right, and now we're going to talk about the ZCC integrated features. So as I mentioned before, we have Zoom Contact Center or ZCC Smart Embed, and this allows developers to quickly embed that soft phone and beyond, so the whole agent experience into their application. Smart Embed is embedded using an iframe through like maybe 5 lines of code. It's very simple to get started with it. Now you can access features such as intelligent wrap-up, so you can use AI to do a wrap-up of the call that happened. You can do live transcriptions of your call to be able to read the words that are being said, and you can also transfer the ownership of a call between agents when you're in a conference call. And there are plenty more features. We also have this Zoom Contact Center APIs that we're using to access user data. So we use the APIs to access our address book and our contact center and be able to list accounts. And we also use an API to be able to access our engagements or list an engagements for a specific user with their credentials. We can list those engagements and then filter out the kind of engagements that we want to show. So for this specific app, to match the architecture of the app as a whole, we are just listing call engagements, but I was able to do that through my list engagements API. And then lastly, we use the Zoom Contact Center flow. So we're able to create a flow on our admin page at zoom.us/myhome under Contact Center Management. And I use this flow essentially to have the phone number that I'll be calling as my entry point to kick off the process for voice authentication. So now let's talk about this app flow, right? We talked about the starting point, working with our flow. So again, ZCC flow is used to prompt the user for a passphrase. Inside of, and I'm actually going to pull this up a little bit later to show us. I'll show us what it looks like, but you can create a flow and your entry point can be a phone number that someone will call. Once they call that phone number, you can create a message that will be played for the user. So we'll hear what it sounds like, but essentially I have a number or I have a message that's being played. And in this use case, I'm going to ask the user to say a passphrase. We'll use that passphrase later on. So once I have that message played, my flow is then going to push the caller or route them to an agent. So we route the user to an agent to begin the phone call and actually connect the users. Again, we'll see what this looks like in the demo. So then the agent, or myself in this case, will answer the call via the smart embed soft phone. So once the call begins ringing, there's going to be a Zoom event that goes off. Now we can access that Zoom event and use it to, again, trigger some other functionality. So I'm using a Zoom event for call ringing, call connected, and I'm using that to go ahead and start my authentication process and trigger that within my code base. Now, once I've gone ahead and triggered my call connected, I'm going to go ahead and start a recording process. So I'm using the Window API to access the media and record the caller via my microphone. Now, I'm doing this for the demos case, and there are other ways to access the caller's audio, but in this case, we're going to go ahead and just start the recording with that event, trigger our Window API to go ahead and access that media, record a soundbite, and there will be a button that I have implemented into my application to end the recording. So we start recording, and then we end the recording. And then once we end that recording, there's some code written to save our soundbite. So again, it can get specific, it can get stretched out in terms of what this process looks like. But for my specific application, I save my soundbite as a blob, and then I use a different library to convert that to an audio buffer. And then we're extracting that audio and then running it against a stored soundbite for similarity. So it sounds like a lot. It can get very complex, but I do want to again emphasize I did this the manual way, and we are going to talk about some different ways to accomplish this that are a little bit easier for production grade applications. But just to run through it again, we're triggering the beginning of our process with our Zoom contact center flow. We're having our entry point be a number that a user will call. Once the user calls, they're routed to the agent. We're using an event to kick off our recording functionality. We are recording a soundbite, ending our recording with a button, saving that soundbite as a blob, running it through to convert it as needed, extracting it, and then comparing it to a previously saved soundbite. We're going to see what all this looks like in our demo, but this is just a macro level overview. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and pass it over and begin our demo of the application. In this demo, we're going to be reviewing our CRM application built with Zoom Contact Center with voice authentication integrated in. So the first thing we see when we go to the homepage of our application is a sign-in button. So we're going to go ahead and sign in so that we can access our dashboard and our app. Once I click sign in, I am redirected to my marketplace for a permissions page where I am going to go ahead and click allow. And this is essentially just giving my application or my created application on the marketplace access to be able to do all of these things within my created application, my CRM application. All right, so now that I'm logged in, I can view my application or view my homepage, and I'm going to see on my homepage that I have access to some basic features. So an earnings overview and a daily call log where I can see all the calls that I've made for the day. And then we're going to look on our right side where we will see our contact center smart embed. Once I click start, I've been logged in, and now I can view my soft phone. So inside of Smart Embed, I can create new engagements or voice calls. I can view past engagements, and I can view my inbox. The one thing I do want to make sure I do is change my status to ready so that I can receive inbound calls. Then on our left side, we're going to see our sidebar with some different options. I do want us to take note though, that this last option is grayed out. And the reason for this is because this is authorized user information that only becomes accessible after voice authentication has taken place. So the idea is if I'm an agent and I'm looking at this application, I receive a phone call from a user and they are telling me, whatever is going on, and whatever the use case is, it prompts me to see that I need to access their authorized information. So to do that, we're going to run through our voice authentication, and then this will become accessible. I also want us to notice that even if I try to access the page via the URL, it still gives me a message telling me the section is only accessible after voice authentication. So again, the idea here is that we have certain information within our application that cannot be accessed until a user has been verified and we know who we are speaking to. All right,
So again, for this demo, we are going to see what it looks like to create a passphrase that'll be stored for reference and then used later on for comparison when going through voice authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into accounts and we're going to pay attention to this section here that says passphrase. This gives me the option when I click it to record a passphrase that is stored and will be used later on. So now I'm going to go ahead and create my passphrase, so we'll have it for reference later on in the demo. Test. All right, so that voice sample was recorded and saved. I can listen to it here. And we're going to use that for comparison. So now we're going to walk through what it looks like or what goes on when a call is received. So again, the idea is I'm an agent, I receive a call from a consumer, and I need to run through that authentication process. So let's look at the flow that I created for this use case and see what's going on there. So in Contact Center, to create a flow, you're going to go to your home page, log in, then go to your home page. You'll scroll down on your left side menu to Contact Center Management, and then you will select flows. I already have the flow that I'm using opened up here. So we're going to look and see what's going on. My entry point is that phone number. So whenever somebody calls this number here, that is the entry point to kick off this flow. Once they've called, they are going to be sent a piece of media. In this case, it's a message that will be played. And the message I created essentially lets the user or the consumer calling, it lets them know to be ready to state their passphrase when connected. And I've done this so that as soon as the user is connected, my authentication functionality is triggered. All right, so once that media plays, the next step is for the call to be routed to, in this case, the agent, and the agent is myself. So I wanted to quickly just look at this very simple flow that was created for this demo. Now let's go ahead and hop back into our application. So we have our passphrase stored. I'm going to now place a call to this number. So on a separate phone, I'm going to call this number so we can see what this authentication process looks like. So on my cell phone, I'm dialing that number and I'm going to play aloud the voice prompt so we can hear it.
Hello, thanks for calling. Please clearly state your passphrase when connected.
So my call is now ringing. I'm going to go ahead and answer. And once I answer, again, that authentication functionality kicks off right away. So I've already been prepared as a user to say my passphrase. I'm going to say that as soon as the call is connected. Test. All right, so now that I have been authorized, my voice authentication went through, everything matched. We're going to see that this button is now clickable and I can access the private user information. So this is what it looks like. This is what the flow or the walkthrough looks like to use voice authentication in an application to access sensitive data or whatever the use case may be. Now, quickly just jumping back into Smart Embed, it's so great. It allows us to do an engagement wrap up at the end. So I'll make a note that says voice authorize, just so I have this stored about my engagement, save and close my wrap up, and that is it. So in this demo, again, we walked through what it looked like to create a sample or reference passphrase, and then what it looks like to use that later on for voice authentication. All right, that is it for our demo. Thank you all so much.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and head back into our presentation. So we did a walkthrough of what our application looked like, what that flow was, and everything else that went with it. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about what's next. So when we think about accessing our voice data, there was a specific method, again, that we use in this application. As I mentioned before, I used the window API to record the caller's audio via my microphone. So it was good, but it could be better. We were able to see how quickly voice authentication happens despite the intricacy, but let's talk about what can make this application better. When you're working with voice authentication and consumer privacy, we want the best, obviously. So if you've been paying attention to the world of Zoom, or if you attended our keynote and our fireside chat, you heard from Tim the announcement of RTMS, which has been recently released. Now, RTMS provides per participant access to media streams like audio over WebSockets without the need for an automated client, aka a participant bot. So in our demo, we access our caller's audio manually with our microphone, the agent's microphone, but RTMS would allow us to directly access their audio stream, improving the sound quality of what's captured. And when we improve the sound quality, we improve the validity of the authorization. It leads to a more accurate authorization process. So RTMS, while it's not available for contact center just yet, it will be soon, and this makes creating this experience that much better, all while staying in-house and using Zoom products. Now, additionally, in our application, speaking of in-house, we use an in-house functionality or created manual functionality for soundbite comparison. As I said before, there is levels to how complex this can get. And while you can do it manually, you will see how it is done manually on this application when you look through the repo. But while you can do it manually, the intricacy of the process is far stretching, as mentioned. And there are actually third-party APIs that you can use and are available to perform voice biometrics for an easier and more precise voice authentication process. So if you did a quick Google search, you would be able to find different companies that offer this service, and you can get started with them to bring in a third party for the voice biometrics and authentication. These are, again, just some different ways to go ahead and create a product that is production level ready. This application is only for inspiration, and it does run through the whole process. But again, making something more production grade ready, you may want to pull in some other tools. So these are just some samples of what can be done. And again, this is for inspiration. There are always fail points that happen when doing any sort of intricate authentication. So do want to make note of that. While we didn't go over all of them in our application, do want to make a note to always consider the possible edge cases or fail points, especially when working with authentication for sensitive information. All right, so that is it for our presentation today on creating a secure customer experience. Now, when we think of the world that we live in, trust is one of the greatest forms of currency. So this is definitely a use case that is not just funny like we saw in the story, right? Not just to reduce stress, but really to increase trust when working across different user experiences and customer experience. So as promised, we are going to go ahead now and take some time for questions, and I will provide the answers. So I'm going to look through the chat and see if there are any that have come through there. Also, we'll look through Q&A, and then if you all have any questions, if we can't ask them live, we can go ahead and do that as well. But if not, feel free to go ahead and include them here. All right, so can I see your implementation in Zoom? Yes, you'll be able to see that. So I see we have a question about implementation. We will have the application released, so you can go ahead and you can clone the repo, look through the repo. So the application will have some content to go along with that as well. So a blog that walks through what's being done throughout the application, walks through the configuration, and then yeah, you can look through the repo as well. So look forward to that. Within the coming week, that'll be available for you all. And then I see another question. I noticed that sentiment analysis is also available in the latest Zoom Embed version 3. Will this feature also be accessible through events? So yes, we have had a recent Zoom Embed. I believe you're talking about Smart Embed, and version 3 was recently released with a host of incredible features. So as for whether or not this will be available through events, Karen, I have to double check that, but I can double check that and get back to you on that question. If you want to DM me your, if it's, very pertinent. If you want to DM me your contact information and email, I can check that out and then send you some documentation relevant to the answer for that question on whether or not it's available. But yeah, this is a good time to mention that Smart Embed version 3 was released, and that is the version we saw in the demo. Thank you for your presentation. I'm still such a novice at Zoom. Well, you know, it is great. We were all a novice at one point. So thank you so much for joining, Virginia. I hope you learned a lot. And if you have any other questions, you can always find us on our developer forum and ask us some questions there, or you can join our office hours that happen on Wednesdays bi-weekly every month. So you can join our office hours there and we can chat there as well. But would love to chat with you and continue to answer questions as you build. Yep, and I see, will the recording be shared? It will be shared on YouTube, so we'll have a chance to view it there. Gonna check for any more questions. Okay, great, Karen. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead and DM your information and we can talk about that. All right, and we'll give it like another minute for any more questions that you all have. And then after that minute, if we have no more questions, we'll go ahead and close up. And like I mentioned before, just want to shout all these things out again. You can catch us in our office hours, and we are always there to answer your questions or chat with you all about what you're building. And you could also find us on the developer forum. You can find us on our YouTube channel. Michael sent that in the chat. You can find us everywhere. So find us, connect with us, and continue to talk to us about what you're looking forward to with Zoom. All right, well, oh, I see a question. What's the new microphone? Since we're also curious, I'm so excited we noticed. Before we close out, this is a Rode wireless go-to microphone. I was really excited to use it, so I am going to make the brave assumption that you all heard my audio like in 4K, if that's even possible. So it's a Rode Wireless 2 microphone, and I was really excited to use it. If you have it and you use it as well, it's great. So this was my first opportunity using it. Glad it got to be with you all. All right, well, I don't think we have any more questions, but again, look forward to content about the specific session and product coming out soon. And find us where you can, and we'll answer any questions there. Thank you all for joining, and that is it for the session.